Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jefferson County, and we are going to continue our conversation with Robert about the history of Jefferson County. Hope you enjoy. So here's some list of things, events that kind of, go on. And again, like we said, you could have a Louisville history specifically about Louisville, and at some point we'll do that as well. Well, if not, we'll cover all the events that happened in Louisville and all that sort of stuff. But so about 1815, the focus of Louisville was beginning to actually shift to the merchant class and kind of away from the agrarian farm part, of the economy. That's kind of, you don't think about Louisville or Jefferson County being farmland at all, but it actually held quite a bit on farming for a while.
Still does. You'd be very surprised. I work in J-Town, Jefferson Town, like you mentioned earlier. And right behind the office where I work at when I'm in the office is a pretty substantial horse farm.
Wow.
And right next, if you go to Mall St. Matthews, which I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this are familiar with that. A lot of people come in to go shopping at the mall, right behind the mall, there's a cornfield. So we've got a lot of agrarian land, a lot of stuff that still exists that is worked as farms. One of my favorite restaurants is Corrali's Rotisserie Chicken, and if I'm going there, I have to go down Taylorsville Road, and I pass by 3 acres of corn. One of the things you see on the side of the road. So that I think a lot of people who don't spend a lot of time in Louisville, or if they come to Louisville, are spending more time downtown or where a lot of people are. You don't realize that it's a big place. And there's a lot of room, and whenever there's a lot of room, you start growing food. So there's a lot of agriculture that happens in Jefferson County for sure.
So Louisville becomes an incorporated city in 1828, and boats are literally, being unloaded, taken apart, built up, loaded back up, and sent down the river. It's really beginning to grow. In 1835, there was a big push to separate Jefferson County and Louisville and make Louisville its own county, which I thought was pretty interesting. However, this was mainly political as well as when I first read this, I was like, well, this has to do with population. They just want to have their own. The population is so much bigger, but it was very political, like I guess most things are. But the Whig dominated the city council, and so they were not able to win county election seats, and so that kind of pushed the separation, but it didn't happen.
The whole story that we told about the merger of Jefferson County in the 20th century and into the 21st century is very much the same story again over again, because you have the one political party at that time. The city was dominated by Democrats and the county was dominated by Republicans, and it was the same exact sort of situation where you wanted to get you can't win county elections, so you try to separate yourself out as your own county. I think one of the things that happened after this, the city's got a lot more power to do a lot of things, especially Louisville, and I think Lexington as well. So the dynamics changed a little bit, but it never really changes. The people inside of the city have one set of political values, and the people further out in the county have a different one. And there's always division that comes from that.
Yeah. Well, so it actually passed the House of Representatives, but it did not pass the Senate. So it didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. Another, the shipment and trade of African-American slaves was another big notable economic boost for Louisville. And, there's ports, and I know there's markers and so forth in Louisville that talks about all this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The slave trade was huge in Kentucky, and there's no really getting around it. It's an important part of our history to acknowledge that trading people and selling people is one of the worst things you could possibly do, but it's one of the things that we did for a very long time. Coming to grips with that history is something that everybody has to do. Lexington has done a lot around this as well. Louisville, I think, we could do a better job of highlighting this and making it more well known, because I think there are more spots. I think that they're a little bit more populated than they are in Lexington. I know like Cheapside in Lexington is a big one, where slave auctions occurred. Northern Kentucky has a ton of stuff. Of course, that was like the last stop on the Underground Railroad before people could get to Cincinnati. But yes, Louisville definitely benefited from the slave trade, and that's something that's definitely part of our history that we have to acknowledge.
Yeah, and that's kind of well, you kind of hit it all there, man. I'll just bring up Louisville in the Civil War. Louisville was occupied by the Union, and yet it was quite big in the slave trade as well. So we kind of those kind of things.
It's very interesting when you talk about the Civil War and the politics of it. So Louisville and Kentucky, of course, remained loyal to the Union throughout the entire Civil War, and of course, like the Southern states, the Democrats ruled the South at the time. And if you look at a map of like who controlled the House of Representatives, seats in the House of Representatives after the Civil War was over, for a brief moment during Reconstruction, there was like full citizenship for Black folks in the South. And of course, at the time, we're voting all for Republicans, and everybody in the North was voting for Republicans because that was their side in the Civil War. So basically, everywhere in the entire country was voting for Republicans, except for border states that remained loyal to the Union. So you have like Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and West Virginia was that's a little different story. But yeah, that's the thing, because Kentucky remained loyal to the Union. We were basically the only Democratic state in the entire country for a while after the Civil War.
Yeah, we're actually going to be covering some Civil War topics coming soon on the old podcast too. So, well, some of those might air before this one, so who knows?
You might have already heard them. Yeah.
Yeah. So Louisville, of course, continues to grow. German and Irish population really starts to boom. So in 1850, 5,000 voters in Louisville, which was more than doubled doubled the number of the rest of Jefferson County, which is shows again the kind of the county or the city versus county divide. You're getting a lot more rural area versus the booming city. Bloody Monday happens, of course, in the 1850s, and we've talked about that. The L&N Railroad rolls in, and
that talk about a topic that could go on for hours and hours. The L&N Railroad and it's important to Louisville and to the whole state. And by importance, I mean its domination of the state's affairs for many years. I think there's a quote I heard in maybe when they were creating the third Constitution out of the four that Kentucky's had, where one of the delegates to the convention said, "If the L&N Railroad has completed its business, I think we can adjourn for the rest, or adjourn the Constitution Committee." So that's they really ran the show there for several years.
It pops in my. I'm trying to think of something that an industry that has that much. I guess you could probably say the horse industry has that kind of pull probably at this point in Kentucky compared to the L&N during that time.
I don't think anything compares to the L&N at that time. The horse industry, of course, I don't want to discount them. They basically get what they want. But yes, the railroad in America, and especially in states where it was, headquartered, the B&O in Maryland, and then L&N in Kentucky, they really ran the whole thing. Pretty much, so.
Yeah. So 1860 rose in the Civil War, and we already kind of talked that. About Jefferson County or Louisville, even that. But here's an interesting thing I did find. And so in 1860, Jefferson County led in the production of hay, animal slaughter, barley, butter. And there's a few others, but those are the ones I named. But, there's more than just the city element going on. There's full-on agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a big county. The land area of Jefferson County is also one of the larger counties in Kentucky, in addition to being high in terms of population. I think I know for sure, Pike County is the biggest county in terms of land area, but Jefferson, I think, is top 10. So there's a lot of space here, in addition to a lot of people. So yeah, there's always been agriculture that's been important to Kentucky, or to Louisville and to Jefferson County. So.
As we move on, Jefferson, another interesting thing.
I don't want to move on quite yet.
Okay.
I did want to mention, we do have antiquated laws that exist about how to do urban agriculture. And it became kind of popular in town, 10 years ago, when a lot of people were moving back to town, out of the suburbs and closer into town to start an urban farm. So I have several friends that raise chickens inside of their, Germantown. If you spend the night in Germantown, you will be woken by roosters all over the place. There are people with 5 or 6 chickens in their backyard. I don't think goats. Some people have goats. Nobody's really wild enough to have a cow or a pig or anything. But you will see tons and tons of chickens in the neighborhoods in Louisville, even among people with less than a quarter-acre plot of land.
Wow.
It's nice. You get eggs. You can have a chicken.
Yeah, there you go.
Pretty good
nothing
deal.
wrong with
Yeah.
city eggs. You know, they're just as good as country
Absolutely.
eggs.
Yeah.
um, Jefferson County also had the most slaves, which would, if you had the
Mhm.
most population, that's probably going to be the thing that 10,000, 304. But at the time, this is interesting, and this goes back to you talking about this being a lot of people. Only one farm had 1,000 acres, so it was very diversely or divided up in farming. A lot of people were farming, not just 2 or 3 mega farms or anything like that. Only one farm with 1,000 acres, and I don't know the acreage of the county right off or nothing, but that's pretty interesting little stat.
The big farm that I know about in Jefferson County is the Farmington Plantation. That is a very popular spot these days to get married. They have all kinds of events out there. They have a historical marker. They maintain it as a historical spot. But that was the Speed family. The Speed family is very important to Louisville. There's this UL Speed School, the engineering school. But then also the Speed Art Museum. Those are the Speeds. But it's also famous because Abraham Lincoln worked there very briefly.
Cool.
And knew the Speeds.
Did he stay with the Speeds?
Yeah. He stayed with the Speeds, and he worked on the plantation there as a laborer at some point in his youth, and also worked in Louisville on the river at some point. Abraham Lincoln definitely has a Kentucky connection, but he also has a Louisville connection, and the Speeds are help form that. I don't know if that was the farm that had 1,000 acres. I would suspect not, because it's kind of close to town. But yeah, that's very close to my house. So it's also near and dear to my heart. But I don't know. I sometimes I think that Abraham Lincoln might have trod the ground where my house is now. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
That sounds like a good story to tell. Tell your daughter that story.
Exactly.
But John Speed was also the mayor before Bloody Monday.
Yeah. So. Yes, absolutely.
Or alderman.
Alderman is that's like a city council person. Alderman. Yeah. And there are a few cities that still have that system, but Chicago's probably the biggest one where they still have wards and aldermen as opposed to city council members and council districts.
Yeah. So fugitive slaves, of course, also went through Louisville to get to Indiana. Civil War, Louisville was controlled by the Union. But in 1875, the Kentucky Derby runs through. A lot of interesting.
We've been doing it every year since, of course. Even last year in September, one of the few where we moved the date. I always think it's interesting when you think about the history of the Kentucky Derby. Again, another whole a subject that could have its own show, but it's part of the Triple Crown, and they started it at the same time. So all three of those races, the Preakness and the Belmont and the Kentucky Derby, all have been run the exact same amount of time. And it would have made sense for them to okay, well, we're three big races. Let's get together and make it the Triple Crown. But no, I think they all started at the same time as a big event. Of course, we're the biggest, so we're the only one that really matters. But
true.
We started, but and we do a big deal. And of course, I'm more interested in more modern history. But the Kentucky Derby Festival is another thing that probably could have its own show. I saw somebody on Facebook trying to count all the different festivals that happen across the city, and they have Tater Days is out in Western County and Marshall County, and you have Hillbilly Days in Greenup County. I don't know if Rockcastle has one. They probably do.
The Bittersweet Festival is Rockcastle.
Bittersweet Festival. So, and I was always thinking, why doesn't Louisville have one? And I realized that we really do, and it's the Kentucky Derby Festival. It goes for 2 weeks. And there's events that span the whole city. We have a hot air balloon race,
a marathon race.
Regular race. That's a one that you probably know about. But yeah, there's the Chuck Wagon. There is a steamboat race, which is pretty cool. But yeah, if people aren't familiar, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Kentucky Derby. But the Kentucky Derby Festival is, in my opinion, even better. It kicks off with Thunder Over Louisville, which also is something people might have heard about. It's a big fireworks show that goes on every year. At one point was the biggest in the world. I don't know if that still holds that championship, but it's worth coming to see at least once. But yes, that's the Kentucky Derby Festival that goes to the Kentucky Derby, and that was kind of started, I think, in the 60s or 70s.
Yes, and the Kentucky Derby was all started over bitter rivalry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't want to have to go to Lexington, have big horse races. We got to do them here at Louisville.
Yeah, Churchill Downs versus Keeneland is not a debate I think anybody in Louisville really wants to have, because Keeneland's, beautiful and really amazing. But it's horse racing needs to be a little grimy. I feel like it's not supposed to be so pretty. And so I think Churchill Downs kind of is really the more appropriate racehorse for the industry itself.
Yeah. You gotta have a motor, man.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in 1890, though, a big tornado rolled through, which again probably it deserves an episode of its own. About 120 died, 200 injured. Pretty devastating to the city. I don't know much more about it than just those facts. Again,
the only thing I know about it is that in the late 70s, there was another huge tornado that didn't kill nearly as many people, but double digits. And people said it's the biggest tornado since 1890. So that's the only thing I know about 1890's tornado, was it was the biggest one since in the 70s, when they had the big tornado that came through, destroyed a lot of stuff. That's what they said, the biggest one since 1890.
I saw a few pictures. It looks pretty devastating.
Yeah.
Give us some time. We'll research it and we'll talk about it again. In 1910, the population of Louisville was 263,000, and 14.8% lived outside of Louisville, which is, it's not even a fifth of the population. So that's quite a bit in the city limits, I guess. Mm-hmm. However, in 1918, I'll get to the population in a minute, but I'll go ahead and mention this. In 1918, Louisville became the first Kentucky county to adopt the commission form of government. And
Jefferson County became the first Kentucky county that adopted the commission form of government.
Oh, yeah, Jefferson, not Louisville. That's right.
Because and I don't know, I think that's the only one that we have now, right? Everybody just has county commissioners and a judge executive, right? I think that's common across every county in Kentucky now. Mm-hmm. So I guess we were the first one to do it. We still technically have it. We have a judge executive, and we have county commissioners, 3 of them, elected in districts, which I don't know if you have to do that in all counties. But yes, it is kind of goofy because they don't have any power whatsoever because of the merger. But we adopted it first, and it's still in existence today.
Pretty cool. So like in Lincoln County, you would have your county judge executive, and then you'd have magistrates, which was basically, they have a district. They each have a district that they take over in the county.
So some counties can have magistrates, but in Kentucky we have commissioners. So I guess that's there is still a difference. I guess you can have.
Their roles are probably pretty much the same thing. I don't exactly know, but yeah. So anyway, so after World War II, the farming population does begin to decrease, and the spread of the urban area kind of takes over the county. Not the whole county, but that things kind of change from there.
Not something that's uncommon is a story across the whole country, because you have people coming back from the war, and there's all kinds of these suburbs that kind of pop up as people have access to money and education as they're coming back from war, and you do see a population explosion across the whole county, and these kind of like suburban areas that you see in urban areas across the whole country.
Yeah. In 1960, there's 30 incorporated cities in Jefferson County with the population of 220,000. Some people contribute that growth being because of the Waterson, or the expressway in 1947, which is the Waterson Expressway. But the population obviously growing, even in the county area. And do you know right off the top of your head the population of Jefferson County now?
Oh gosh, I think it's 800,000. Hold on, I'm on my computer. Let's see.
Right,
population.
We can edit this part out.
Jefferson County. Well, you can if you want to. 766,000 as of 2019.
Okay.
In 1992 it was 669,000. So we've grown quite a bit since then.
Quite a bit. Yeah. Well, quite a bit since 1960. That's a pretty good growth. So that is a brief history of Jefferson County. There's loads more, of course, we can talk about.
Man, we can get into all kinds of stuff. We were left on the table. Yeah, I know that a lot of times we can talk about schools. Like there's the history of schools in Louisville is very, very interesting, because you used to have separate school districts for the city and for the county. just like a lot of places across Kentucky where you'll have an independent school district that's maintained by a city or a district inside of a county.
Yeah.
But Louisville's actually started with the Louisville school system.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the first high school west of the Allegheny Mountains is in Louisville at Male High School. It was all male high school at that point. There was a female high school for a while, but it merged with a school started by the DuPont family, which was used to train manual laborers, which was, of course, named Manual High School. And they merged with Female High School, and that's how you get male and manual. And it played one of the most, I'm partial to this rivalry because I went to Manual High School, and we've played the high school football game, annually since prior to World War II. It's one of the oldest football rivalries in the whole country. It used to be played every year on Thanksgiving Day. My uncle played in it for male. On the last one on Thanksgiving Day, which I believe was in the 70s, it still maintains a high status, even though male beats the crap out of us every year. So, there are, and then like the expansion of the school system, all the different high schools, the merger of JCP or Jefferson County Public Schools and Louisville Public Schools, very, very controversial, a big deal. Busing as an issue in Louisville, as it was in many urban areas across the country. That's a huge part of our history about schools too. So the schools, that's something we could get into at some point too. I know you like to talk about churches. Churches are a big deal in the state of Kentucky, but a huge deal in Louisville as well. We have some of the oldest churches in the whole state, and two of the only seminaries. I believe we have the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary and the Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary are actually neighbors to one another, which I think is kind of funny. But those have their own unique and individual history. Why they were founded is always interesting. The Presbyterian Seminary actually started in Danville and moved up to Louisville. The Baptist Seminary has very interesting 20th century history with a huge takeover by, if you get into like the history of the 70s and 80s and how religion got tied up with politics quite a bit in that era. The Southern Baptist Theological Seminary is a main player in that drama. So that's something to talk about as well. There's all kinds of stuff we could.
You bring up schools. I think of, you think about segregation in schools in Louisville. I would think that was a way bigger ordeal as opposed to schools in, Rockcastle County or Lincoln County, in more rural schools. The populations were probably not as diverse. Definitely probably not as diverse.
And you didn't really have the population have that many schools. Like in Louisville, I think one of the big reasons you have segregation in schools is just because there are so many schools. Like there's so many kids, and they got to all go to all these different schools. Rockcastle only has one or two high schools, right?
One. Whoa.
Yeah,
one.
Right. Yeah. And it's a little different. That gets a little dicey because you can get to a place like Owensboro, which has several, and there's a history, the history of segregation in a place like that's a little different. Hopkinsville, also like Paducah, Western Kentucky is a little bit of a different story than Eastern Kentucky. But in Louisville, there were a lot of kids, and they did definitely practice segregation in one of its worst forms. It took them a very, very long time to implement Brown versus Board of Education. It was done by court order. So basically, and this is a whole crazy story, but there was a court that said you have to integrate and you have to do it this year. And the order was given, I believe, in May. So they had like 3 months to figure out how to implement a busing strategy that upended everybody's lives. My mother was actually in the very first bust class. And the way that they ended up doing it was they said, if your last name starts with A, B, F, or Q, you get taken out of your high school and sent to a different one. My mom's maiden name is Butler, and she went to Westport High School, which is now middle school, but she got plucked out of her school and sent to Central. So she actually graduated from Central High School in Louisville. Don't get her started on that story because you'll be stuck talking about that for a very long time. But, it is kind of wild. And I'm glad, I don't want to speak for my mom because, she has her own story to tell, but I always appreciate those stories because it does like have a story that we can tell in the family about how different those schools were and how poorly resourced those schools were and how difficult it was for all those students to, there's no way you're going to get ahead if your school looks like Central High School did in the 70s.
Yeah.
It would have been very difficult. And not to say it's better now. There's a really great series about Louisville's desegregation efforts that was in the Courier Journal earlier this year. Everybody should check that out for sure, about the success and or failure of the busing situation. But I mean, in my opinion, things are better now, but they are better than they were now, which isn't to say there isn't a long, long way to go before there's true equity in our school system. But it is a crazy story from a historical standpoint for sure.
I believe there was an African American school in Crab Orchard, and I think that there may have been another one in Lincoln County, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know for sure. But you talk about the churches too, and before we get too off of topic, there's loads of historical churches out in Kentucky that's been around a long time. A seminary, did I say that right? Seminary. That's a whole nother topic, a whole nother avenue to go down. Those would be very unique. Yeah, and there's also the Catholic influence too. There's a big Catholic influence in Louisville as well.
Right. Catholics are it's kind of an urban religion in Kentucky or in the United States. There's a lot of Catholics in like Washington County, Marion County, areas, Nelson County down there, like the Bardstown area. But so there are a lot of Catholics outside of urban areas in Kentucky, but the diocese is in the archdiocese is here in Louisville, and the role of the parishes in Kentucky is in Louisville is such a huge deal. And the picnics, we didn't really get into the picnics, but there's tons and tons. When it gets to be picnic season, there's places you could go every weekend. They have fish fries and they have all kinds of the cake wheels and all kinds of stuff. And whether or not you're Catholic or not, it's always kind of fun to go. But there's a huge Catholic population, and the influence of the Catholic population on our politics is something that is definitely borne out in our healthcare system. Catholics were major players in creating a lot of the hospitals across Louisville. So that's a big deal as well. And also Louisville has a very substantial Jewish population, probably not present in many of the other places in Kentucky. I lived in Lexington for a while, and that was one of the things I noticed when I moved there is there were way fewer Jewish people here in Lexington than there were in Louisville. And we have a Jewish community center. We have several synagogues. There's preschools that the Jewish community operates. Some of the best, highest rated in the whole city are operated by Jewish people. Right outside of my house, I actually live very close to the Jewish community center, and there's Orthodox Jewish people walking down my street all the time. So it's definitely something you don't see everywhere in Kentucky, but definitely something that's very important to our history as well. Yeah,
definitely. That's one thing. When you look at Kentucky, you got a bit of everything, and Louisville brings in a big part of the diversity as far as the state goes. Well, anything else you got?
Much, right? But we can't get to it all now. We can focus in on any of these things. Hey, you know what? Tell your people to email you about whatever topic they want to talk about specifically, and I'll come back and talk about that. They want to talk more about education, we can talk more about that, do some more research on it. If they want to talk more about religion and churches and the history of the seminaries, we can talk about that too. So, or if you want to talk about war, farming, any of these kinds of things, Louisville touches all of it. So, we deserve 20% of the episodes, James. So,
well, I'll try to catch up as
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, where can everybody connect to you at, find you at? The podcast too.
Yeah, I host a different Kentucky podcast. It's called My Old Kentucky Podcast. It's about government and politics in the modern day for Kentucky. It comes from a more progressive viewpoint. So if that's not you, don't listen. There's other ones you can listen to. Maybe you can't. You can listen if you want to. You probably get mad. But that's what I do a lot of the time. Every Wednesday we have new episodes every week. I'm on social media at RKAHNE. That's me on Twitter and Facebook. I've been known to write for different outlets, so you can find my stuff different places. But that's the main places you can find me.
Robert, thanks for coming back on. We will come back on, hopefully join again with maybe some more Louisville history. I might get some emails that says, hey, let's talk about this, and we can go forward. There's just so much, man. Louisville is so big. I'm planning on coming to Louisville here over the summer too, watch the soccer game. So there's plenty to do.
History of soccer in Louisville, that's another really good one. We can talk about youth soccer, the explosion of youth soccer in the 80s and 90s, and the start of the USL team now, and the women's NWSL team, and everything that we've got.
Now last year was the women's first year, right?
Yeah, I don't know how you count it, because it was kind of a wonky year. This is I guess it's the second year, but it's the first real year where you can kind of go, and the league is kind of operating like it normally would operate.
New stadium, it's all there.
Exactly. There's games every weekend now, so it's really great.
Yeah, so go to Louisville, visit Louisville. I encourage it. I like going to Louisville as much as I can. But we will get Robert back on here, and we will find out some more Jefferson County, Louisville, J-Town, Middletown. We can
St. Matthews, Shively, Portland. There's a great song by a guy in Louisville who goes through all the names of all the different neighborhoods.
Oh wow!
The punchline is he says he doesn't care for St. Matthews. So that's
all right. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and that'll be it. We'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
Listen
Looking
next
forward
time.
to it. Yeah.